More on that story throughout the morning. In the meantime, we're going to turn our attention to the Australia-US ministerial dialogue in Sydney. The Australian Defence and Foreign Ministers meeting with the US Secretary of State and Secretary of Defence. With me from the US Studies Centre, Associate Professor Brendon O'Connor. Brendon O'Connor, this meeting, initially you would have thought it was going to focus a lot on the US pivot to Asia and our region and the military presence here. But of course, Iraq is going to dominate the talks now.
I think so. I mean, the Americans really want to focus more on Asia, but it's rather like that line from The Godfather. Just when they try to get out of the Middle East, it keeps pulling them back in. Events in Syria, events in Iraq, events in the Gaza, events, of course, in Iran. So America is very entangled in the Middle East. I think Obama has signalled that America cannot solve the problems of the Middle East alone, and it'd be better off paying less attention to it. But it's been very hard to disentangle itself from the Middle East and focus more on what will be the centre of world politics, I think, in the century we live in, the Asia-Pacific, and is of, in some ways, more significance to the United States militarily and economically, but the troubles of the Middle East are just sort of unending in some regards and incredibly complicated.
You have this humanitarian crisis alongside a political, very precarious political situation in Baghdad. The president did make some comments this morning from Massachusetts, wanting to try and bolster the newly, the Prime Minister designate who was announced in the last couple of days.
Yes, I mean, the Maliki government has been one that seems to have failed. The sense is that they couldn't bring enough of a coalition of forces together. There wasn't enough cooperation. But whether Maliki will stand aside, we'll find out over the next couple of days. He's still the president of Iraq, rather the Prime Minister of Iraq. So there's this real sense that it's both enormous political risk at stake here, obviously, severe military problems with this bombing already going on in the north of Iraq by the Americans. Iraq has been boiling away, waiting for these problems maybe to blow up as they have really in the last couple of months. And it's, I suppose, really a sorry legacy of that war in Iraq, which certainly wasn't finished and wasn't a good idea to begin with.
When you look at the force posture situation of the United States in our region and in Australia, with the boost of the number of Marines on the rotation through the Northern Territory, how significant is it, the increase in this agreement that will be signed off today, was agreed to by the two leaders back a couple of months ago, and what sort of implications are there from this when it comes to reaction in the region from no less than China, which has expressed its concerns about the enhanced defence ties?
Well, when Barack Obama came to Australia in 2011, it was announced then that troops would get up to about 2,500 coming through Darwin. So in some ways it's just more of a codification of what was announced then. It's really not a dramatic increase, it's that same number, but maybe higher rotations there more permanently, or there more regularly would be the right word. The Air Force training element of it, I think, has already been happening. It's just going to put it into some kind of forward posture agreement, as they call it in the terminology. Whether there'll be more American ships going to the Stirling base in Western Australia is something to watch. The Geraldton satellite base has been something which has been negotiated over the last few months. So there's a slow creeping sense that more and more activity is occurring in Western Australia, in the top half of Australia and the Northern Territory particularly. And the question will be over the next few weeks and months, is this going to be explained to the Australian people a little bit more, or is the approach of the government going to be a sort of quietly approach? We're going to cooperate more with America, but we don't want to make too big a deal of it. And that would be my sense of what would be probably the more sensible approach.
And just quickly, almost out of time, about 30 seconds left, but China, any thoughts on those sensitivities?
Well, that, I think, gets to what I was saying. I think it would be sort of foolish if Kerry or Hagel or any of our politicians made a big announcement of this. I think it's better to have these talks, show close sort of cooperation, but not overplay it.
Okay, gotcha. Brendon O'Connor, thank you very much for your insights this morning. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That's all for AIM Agenda. Thank you for your company. More Sky News after the break.